Thank you for joining us today. I'm Andrea Weiss, Chair of the Delivering Good Board of Directors. Welcome to our third and final panel discussion in our Women of Inspiration Roundtable series. We've been presenting these events to celebrate experiences in women's leadership and offer insights to support women in their journeys. Our previous speakers and panelists from June 2nd and June 9th have talked about the success of women in business, academics, government, and public service, as well as the impact of gender in the charitable giving space. Some of the points that have stuck with me include the words of Cent Marshall, CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, from our June 2nd panel. She was describing her mother, Carolyn Gardner, as her woman of inspiration. And here are her words. She said, "She taught me the 3 L's of leadership: listening to people, learning from people, and loving people in order to lead them. So she's my inspiration." Listening was also a key principle among the philanthropic leaders at our June 9th event. Jacqueline Novagrants, a pioneer of impact investing and founder and CEO of Acumen, explained that they have a bottoms-up approach to measuring the impact of their investments. They develop the metrics and process by listening to the people being served. Women's leadership is critical to the mission of delivering good, and we have a long history of it. I'm proud to be chair. I support an incredible female CEO. We were co-founded by women. We have a highly diverse board of women and incredible men. For 36 years, we've provided new merchandise to help instill dignity, hope, and self-esteem for children, men, women, and whole families facing difficult circumstances. Delivering Good has a vision for a more equitable world in which children, adults, and families facing challenges have the useful items that they need and value, including clothing, home goods, toys, furniture, shoes, books, and other consumer products to overcome adversity and help them reach their full potential. When I listen to the personal stories of how our work makes a difference, it reminds me of the impact we can have. For Charmel, a single mom in Pittsburgh, a donation of dressier clothes came at just the right time for her. She shared with us how she felt by saying, "I've been considering trying to enter a new career in an office setting, but I was concerned about the cost of professional clothing on top of all my other expenses. This gift truly made me feel beautiful and confident and came during a time when I really needed that boost." Delivering Good needs your support so that we can continue to help people in need like Charmel and many more. During this program, you'll see a message to donate via text to pledge. So please support us when you see the message. You can also visit us online to donate at delivering-good.org. Today's panelists are all distinguished business leaders. They'll share with you their visions for the future, for our society, our economy, our world, and our personal lives as we recover, rebuild, and in some cases, redefine ourselves in the wake of the pandemic. Our moderator today is Lori Mitchell-Keller, Global Head of Industry Solutions at Google Cloud. She'll be joined by Meg Crofton, who had a 35-year experience with the Walt Disney Company, last as president. Valerie Grant will also join us from AllianceBernstein, Pam Kaufman from ViacomCBS, and James Rhee, an impact investor and successful CEO, who also holds the Johnson Chair of Entrepreneurship at Howard University. Please welcome today's panel, enjoy our program, and thank you in advance for your support.
Thanks so much, Andrea. And welcome, everyone. It's exciting to be here. This is, as Andrea said, the third and final roundtable in the Women of Inspiration series. And today's topic is all about a new day and a new horizon. So first, let me start by introducing our panel in a little bit more detail. So first we have Meg Crofton, and Meg is, as Andrea mentioned, a 35-year veteran of the Walt Disney Company and the former president of Walt Disney Parks and Resorts. In her last role, she was responsible for the operations of the company's theme parks and resorts in Florida, California, and France. And Meg now currently coaches and speaks on a wide range of leadership issues while serving on multiple boards. And during her tenure at Walt Disney, she led the largest expansion in the history of the Magic Kingdom Park, launched the expansion and rebranding of the property's retail, dining, and entertainment complex, and was at the forefront of the award-winning My Magic Plus technology initiative aimed at transforming the guest experience. Meg is also widely known and respected for her outstanding leadership and passion for a world-class customer and employee experience. She believes that when great brands, culture, and leadership are present, employees in any organization can make magic happen. And upon her retirement from Disney, Meg received the company's highest honor, a dedicated window on Main Street, USA in the Magic Kingdom Park, which celebrates her legacy of mentoring and leadership development. Welcome, Meg. Anything you want to add?
Thank you so much, Lori. I just would add that I'm so happy to be here. This is my heart work because I think we all have a responsibility and a privilege to share our journeys in life and in leadership. And I've experienced by listening to the other two panels, just what I always do, that I feel like I have received more than I hope I am able to give. So I'm really happy to be with everyone here today.
Thanks so much, Meg. And our next panelist is Valerie Grant, who's the Senior Vice President and Senior Portfolio Manager at AllianceBernstein, where she is responsible for U.S. equities, a large cap U.S. equities portfolio that invests in companies that are performing well or improving in the dimension of corporate social responsibility while generating attractive risk-adjusted returns. Valerie is a thought leader in the field of responsible investing and has appeared on CNBC's Power Lunch, as well as Nightly Business Report to provide commentary on climate change, responsible investing, and the equity markets more broadly. At AllianceBernstein, Valerie co-chairs the Equity, Environmental, Social, and Governance Research Committee and is an active supporter of the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, whose mission is to develop and disseminate sustainability accounting standards. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Is there anything you want to add that I missed in your outstanding career?
No, thank you. I'm just excited to be here. I've been with AllianceBernstein for 15 years, and I guess one fun fact that many people don't know about me is that early in my career, I actually worked at Ben & Jerry's, which sort of planted the seed for what I do now. So that's actually not on my official bio. But it's an important, I think, pivot to where we are today. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Valerie. And our next panelist is Pam Kaufman, who's the president of Global Consumer Products for ViacomCBS Incorporated, one of the largest entertainment companies in the world. In this role, Pam oversees the multi-billion-dollar global consumer products organization, covering all brands in the portfolio, including BET, CBS, Comedy Central, MTV, Nickelodeon, Paramount Pictures, and Showtime. Pam has transformed the consumer products business and unified the organization by putting the full power of the ViacomCBS ecosystem behind its most valuable IP. She has built some of the most culturally relevant and iconic brands through new content and strategic partnerships. Her commitment to transformation, innovation, and brand building has led to some of the most groundbreaking partnerships in the company's history. Welcome, Pam. Anything you want to add?
Well, I know when this is over, I'm calling Valerie for a contact at Ben & Jerry's because we have to get a SpongeBob pineapple ice cream. So Valerie will be talking. I need a contact there. No, I'll just add a couple of things. What the bio doesn't say is that I am incredibly fortunate because I get to work with the most outstanding consumer products team in the business. And we work on IP that is just extraordinary, like SpongeBob, Paw Patrol, South Park, The Godfather, Top Gun, just to name a few. So I just wanted to be clear about the IP. And then the only other thing I just want to add is it's really a privilege to be here, obviously with these incredible panelists, but also I've been involved with the Delivering Good organization for quite some time. I'm a huge fan of Carol Postal and was honored a couple of years ago. And again, I think the work you guys do is extraordinary. So thanks again for including me today. It's always great to be back with this team.
Thanks, Pam. And our fourth panelist is James Rhee, who's an impact investor, founder, CEO, and educator who empowers people, brands, and organizations to fulfill their true potential by marrying capital with purpose and truth across multiple systems. Now, James led the remarkable transformation and reimagination of Ashley Stewart, one of the country's largest brands serving Black women, under his leadership as chairman, CEO, and investor from 2013 to 2020. James holds appointments at both MIT Sloan School of Management and Duke Law School as a senior lecturer, where he teaches future leaders about organizational systems and deconstructed investment principles related to money, life, and joy. On March 31st, 2020, Howard University announced that James would serve a 3-year term as the Johnson Chair of Entrepreneurship, a professor of entrepreneurship, and senior advisor to the newly endowed Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership, beginning with the 2021-2022 academic year. Welcome, James. It's a pleasure. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's not lost on me that what an honor it is to be the only man on this series of panels. And I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by, led by, educated by, supported by incredible women my whole life. And it's something that's been very meaningful for me. Just really happy to be here. And I'm really honored to be on the panel.
Well, welcome all of you. So let's dive in. I want to start maybe with a quote from Melinda French Gates, who said, "You can create all kinds of new tools, but if you're not moving toward equality, you're not really changing the world. You're just rearranging it." So first, let's talk about the business and commercial worlds. So if you think about it, what is the most significant change you expect in the next 3 to 5 years? And maybe Pam, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lori. Well, first of all, there's no doubt that the pandemic has changed a lot for what's going on with all of us. And I think if I had gotten this question a little over a year ago, I might have had a different answer. But when you think about the next 3 to 5 years, for us, there's really 3 things. There's probably more than 3, but I think for our space, there's 3 things impacting us right now. The first is definitely the growth of e-commerce. And you could say, well, obviously it's been growing for quite some time, but I think what's extraordinary is online purchasing and e-commerce shopping has grown 28% over the last year, compared with the 17% that was projected. And it has just accelerated so many companies and brands to think about a true omni-channel approach. And so I just think as we think about the world of consuming content, obviously product, e-commerce is going to continue to play a really important role. And the companies that are defining this space will win. And I also think there's a lot of smaller companies emerging, which has played a huge role for us, of course. And then the second thing is the role of direct-to-consumer efforts that are happening. At our company, we launched 8 direct-to-consumer shopping sites last year. We see this as, again, a big opportunity to be able to tell stories while obviously selling products. So that would be the first trend. The second thing, again, it sounds obvious, but it's really new to what's happened in the last year. And I think the world of home will continue to be a really important sector for our business as well as the consumer. So if you look at Home Depot's business went up 20% last year. Lowe's was up 24%. So the time you're spending in your home and how you're improving your home will only continue. We've also seen that 76% of everyone in the US has done one thing to improve their home. And I think as we watch the world, definitely in the US, start to get a little bit return to normal and office space opening up, you're still not going to see this full-time employment. So the world that you live in will continue to be a very important aspect of life and definitely business, and I'd say culture in general. And the last thing that's been so cool to watch is the world of nostalgia. So during 9/11, the world really, it was a very unsettled time. People started watching a lot of content that they grew up on and consuming products that made them feel comfortable. And then that dissipated a little bit. And what we've seen this year, again, during the pandemic, and we continue to grow, is people want to cling to brands that they really feel comfortable with. In fact, there was a recent New York Times article that showed, and I'm just going to really read for 1 second, that old movies or taking up old hobbies are really important in terms of alleviating stress and anxiety. And so again, as a company that has some of the most iconic IP characters and brands in the world, like a SpongeBob SquarePants, we're seeing an unbelievable growth in people consuming this content. And it's a big trend. We see it continuing. We're relaunching iCarly, which was obviously a show back when. We relaunched Blue's Clues and You, which will celebrate its 25th anniversary. We launched the Rugrats. And there's tons and tons of products and brands that are just having a moment. And this is truly comfortable for today's consumer. So those are kind of the three things I'm seeing going on right now, Lori.
Thanks so much, Pam. That was wonderful. Valerie, do you want to help us understand what you think are some of the most significant changes over the next 3 to 5 years?
Sure. So from where I sit, what I'm seeing is a secular shift when it comes to the world of investments, as well as how companies manage themselves and allocate resources, because there is now an increasing focus on acknowledging the interests of stakeholders other than shareholders. So in addition to shareholders, acknowledging the interests of other stakeholders, and a very sharp focus on corporate social responsibility and corporate trust. I think that given what we've seen, not just with the COVID-19 pandemic, but with calls for racial equality and other calls for social justice globally, right? Because it's not just the US, but if you look globally, this is happening. People are really asking companies to play a role in providing solutions and being forward thinking. And as an example, we're starting to see environmental, social, and governance metrics in the executive compensation plans of named executive officers. We're seeing an unprecedented level of environmental, social, and governance related issues appearing on proxy voting statements, as an example. So I really think that there's been a sea change and there's no turning back, so to speak. So the level of transparency that is expected, the level of disclosure, and quite frankly, the level of performance. The expectations are simply higher than they've ever been, and I think that the bar will continue to be raised. So those are some of the key trends that I see from the seat where I sit at AllianceBernstein. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Valerie. I mean, that certainly resonates with me very well, because Google is very focused on ESG initiatives, and I'm trying to make the world a better place. So Meg, what are your thoughts in this aspect about change that might happen over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes, well, I think it's really clear that transformational change is happening on so many fronts, and the pace is increasing at an increasing rate. I totally agree with what Pam said about post-pandemic effect. When I think about all the things that I always read lists of the mega trends, the things that different organizations are predicting. I read them every year, and it's always interesting to me to see what are the trends that everybody cites and what are the ones that are different. But the question, as I thought about it and tried to narrow it down to two for me that are very much a part of what I'm dealing with in my work every day, would be first, to Valerie's point on ESG and the recognition that there are stakeholders that include more than your shareholders. So your customers, your employees, your investors, your regulators, all of that coming together to demand a new focus from companies to be more, to link their business strategies to ESG metrics, which I don't think are mutually exclusive events at all, to,
Right.
as Valerie said, be more transparent with them. The second trend that is around me all the time is just the increasing use of technology, and in particular AI and the implications for that. And again, increasing at an increasing rate. I'm excited about it because I think technology enables so many things, but I also know that it is a real challenge, and there's a lot of ethical questions around it that still have to be addressed. And I guess the one takeaway that I have in this technology space is that for me, what I learned in working on digital transformation projects in my past is that it's not a technology project. It's a leadership task, and that we all have to double down on leading and helping our teams through this, because technology and what it's going to do is touching and will touch every process and every person in our world.
Thanks so much, Meg. I think what's interesting to me, and that I just want to emphasize of what you said, is that digital transformation is not a technology thing, right? It's a process thing and a leadership thing. I mean, if you don't have the processes identified that you want to transform and you don't have the leadership behind it, nothing will change. And so if you really want to get to that, technology next level and into digital or cloud, it really requires the right leadership and the right visioning to help everybody understand why the change is needed. And then I just also wanted to comment on your comment on AI and the ethical implications, because I'm super excited about AI. We do a lot of that at my company, but we also have some very strong ethical committees to determine, when we're thinking about a new application of AI, is it actually one that we should pursue from an ethical perspective? So thank you so much. Those were great comments. And James, what are your thoughts?
Well, Laura, you and I met when you and I were on the board of the National Retail Federation together. And your listeners here probably don't know, up until 2013, I had never worked at a retail company before, other than, if you count, washing dishes at Red Lobster and bussing tables when I was 15, 16 in there. For my whole career, I've invested billions and billions of dollars of money. I've owned a lot of, been a general partner at a distressed fund, at a growth fund. So 2013, I had some predictions, and enough so where I completely turned my life upside down. So to be part of a failing business that was servicing women of color, and then plus size women. So my three predictions back then, I think a lot of these things that have happened over the last 8 years have sort of borne out. They've accelerated during the last 15 months. Number one, not to be a downer, but I was worried about a lot of what I would call like kind of Ray Bradbury and science fiction sadness, like existential crisis, that people would be sad and lonely, and that technology, when not used correctly, right, it can be if it's used in a manipulative way, can do some damage, and that people would become upset, and that in an environment like that, I talked often in 2014-15 about transparency and trust, and that people would be able to see through things very quickly, brands and leaders. Number two, I was betting as an investor. I've been long women and long, let's just say, a broad spectrum of brown for 10 years. And I was very frustrated that in my private equity industry, and there are very few women and, let's just say, brown, broadly defined people controlling money. Enough so that I couldn't get any money to help me work with the women of Ashley Stewart. I hope that will continue to change. It needs to change faster. And number three, the other prediction that I think will continue to happen over the next 5-10 years, you're going to have a lot more demands of brands and employers to treat people, whether as employees, colleagues, labor, whichever term you want to define, that the value proposition has to be different. Because when you juxtapose that with the failure of investment in education, there will have to be a significant amount of investment in people through employers. And Gen Z and younger will demand that too. So, I've been in impact/ESG investing for, I guess it's been 12, 13 years now, and it's getting more mainstream, but it's going to have to accelerate.
Thanks, James. And for any of us that have Gen Zers in the house, we exactly know what you're saying in terms of demanding the impact and the change. So the next question that I want to move to is, when we think about moving toward equality and equal participation by women in your industries and our society, what are the new tools and where do you see the real change? Meg, maybe we can start with you.
Okay. So I'm encouraged by real change, as you say, but I want to start by saying I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the impact that this past year and a half has had on women in the workforce. And whether it's labeled she's session or whatever you want to call it, it's had a major impact. And while I'm very concerned about that, I'm also hopeful that it's been so dramatic that it's shown a great light on the issue, and that in fact maybe solutions that we've always needed will come forward even faster. So moving on to some things that I think are really positive, I think the fact that there is more data and more transparency about the workforce and the focus on the entire pipeline. I love a couple of phrases I read in a recent Aspen Institute 2021 report of their predictions, and they said accountability is the prerequisite to progress, and the say to do ratio is key. So I think that's really powerful, and I see a lot of that happening. More C-suite advocacy for change. As we all know, change really has to happen at the top of an organization. So I think we see more C-suite leaders and CEOs taking an active role in this. A stronger recognition that diversity and inclusion around all senior leadership tables is not just the right thing to do, that it is a business imperative. I think post-pandemic, there's a new appreciation for the type of head and heart leadership that is needed. And I've always bristled at the term soft skills of leadership, those things like communication and empathy and transparency and listening, all of that, because I actually think those are really the hard things to do day in and day out. And so, and I do think they represent traits that stereotypically are strengths of women. So I believe that bodes really well. The fact that we're all having much deeper and more authentic conversations around, brave conversations, whatever you want to call it, about inclusion. I like the unconscious bias training that's being offered. We all have that. I love the fact that I think we're all stepping forward to call it more in the moment when we see it. And then last but not least, I'll go to where James started, which is I'm so glad he's here, and I'm so grateful for so many more men stepping forward as allies and enablers for equality. And I'm very encouraged by that.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. I totally agree. It takes a diverse group, right, to really make that change for equality. I loved your head and heart comments, and the unconscious bias, as you mentioned, is definitely a problem, and we all need to step up and call it, like you said, when we see it. James, what are your thoughts about equality and equal participation by women in industry and society, and any new tools, or where do you see the real change?
Look, I think the change right now, it looks to me a little bit more barbellish. You have more leaders stepping up and leading and saying the right things, and more and more people doing the right things too. I think there'll always be some sayers and who don't do. And I see the other real change at just Gen Z and younger, with some millennial. Like there's real change there. There's a soulful change. And at the entry level at a lot of companies. In the middle, I think all of us would acknowledge that the middle of the barbell sometimes is a little bit more challenging, where the change, it's a little bit halting, maybe a little bit more resistance to it. for me, like my whole career as an investor or as an educator or as a, operator, like I look at things like diversity, differences. Like for me, those are marks of an agile brain. That if you're not able to suspend disbelief, that if you can't see things that don't exist now, and if you can't think orthogonally, and more importantly, get other people to think orthogonally and to see it, then you generally will do the same thing over and over again. It's a pretty conventional growth pattern. So the way I talk about DEI and about gender issues is much more on a creativity and agility standpoint with a healthy dose of neuroscience, right? That, it's what Meg was saying, is like, can you slow down your mind? Like, really, can you really think? And for me, during my 40s, I'm 50 now, like I feel more like I did when I was reading Harold and the Purple Crayon than I've ever read. That I'm able to, like I'm just drawing new worlds and new systems and new ideas and saying, well, why can't that happen? And it's what happened at Ashley Stewart. And, it's, obviously my role here on this panel, but I'm really excited about the role I'm going to play to support Professor Dewuny at the Women's Center at Howard. That is it orthogonal? Well, kind of maybe if you think that way, but maybe it makes a whole lot of sense, actually.
Lori, can I jump in for a second? Because I just want to.
Please.
No, I just love what James and Meg both said, and I think you talked about Harold and the Purple Crayon, James, but what we're trying to do right now, definitely at ViacomCBS, if not all the companies that I am talking to and all my friends at companies, this is a moment to rethink the workplace. It's a moment to rethink how we are when we go to the office, how we're traveling, and we kind of don't want to lose this moment. And especially when it comes to women, we know that women have suffered the most during the pandemic. And, we've all seen the research around what's happened. And I think this is a great moment to figure out how we are going to return to office. Do we have to be there full time? Does travel have to happen full time? How are we going to think about caretaking and obviously having children and maternity leave, et cetera? And again, I work for a company that's really been thinking about this. It's been very vocal about it, that wants to transform during this time. And I want to put a kind of an exclamation on that. And, Meg keeps bringing up great leadership. And it really does start with leaders. And as one of the leaders of the company, we are being encouraged to flex new muscles and think differently about how to approach going to the office and our employees in that way. And again, especially women who are shouldering a lot of the responsibility that we've seen. And so anyway, I think it's a great topic right now. And we really have to work hard right now and be intentional about how we're going to approach the future of the office space.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. Valerie, what are your thoughts in this area? Oh, your audio isn't working.
Apologies, I was muted.
Yeah,
So,
perfect.
one of my favorite topics, and I love the say-do ratio. The say-do ratio, it's all about the say-do ratio, because we live in a moment, I think, when many organizations have been saying a lot. There's been this huge volume of press releases and proclamations, and I think it's time for a check-in. On how's the doing coming along, after all the saying, because in the investment business, it's challenging. I wish I could say, oh my gosh, things have gotten so much better. We have so many more female portfolio managers and women as GPs of private equity funds and venture capital funds, but I just don't think that the numbers bear that out. Right? The numbers really have not moved substantially, especially if you look for women who are actually managing assets and deploying capital. One of the things that I found is that you tend to see women in other roles and other types of positions, which are obviously very important, to the institution, whether that's investor relations or it's technology and operations, any number of other areas. But if you look at the people actually deploying capital, there is not actually a lot of diversity generally in those areas.
Right.
And so I think that we have to really embrace the notion of, are we actually cultivating the talent that already exists? I think it's somewhat disingenuous to say, oh my goodness, there's no pipeline. We have to go find sophomores in college and convince them that a career in financial services is for them. Because if you take that strategy, it'll be another 20 years, right, before there's any movement whatsoever. But in most of these organizations, there are women and women of color and people of color who are already there. So you could take a look at the talent you have and say, okay, are we actually cultivating, right, and growing the talent that currently exists? And the other thing, I want to commend Alphabet, your firm, for your transparency and rigor, particularly as it relates to your disclosures on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and on pay equity. You guys have the best pay equity reporting that I have seen. You take the approach of, you look at, I think it's some type of a multi-factor regression analysis, and you say for all of the factors that could drive compensation, I'm serious, I've read it. You know, if there's anything that cannot be explained reasonably, you know, whether it's the job, the tenure, you know, whatever, you actually do a true up. You say, okay, we found this variance, we're not sure why it exists. Okay, we have a bucket, you know, 5 million, 10 million, and we do true ups. And that gives, I think, employees, I would say, some assurance that, oh my goodness, if there's any discrepancy, hopefully there's a check and balance, right? And, you know, it's disclosed fully to investors. So as an investor, you know, again, I'm focused on this from a ESG perspective. I like that level of transparency and rigor. And I wish more companies would actually embrace that approach. So those are my thoughts on equity and inclusion in our industry.
Thanks, Valerie. I laugh because multivariate analysis sounds exactly like Alphabet and Google, right? We like the complex problems, but thanks so much for the call out. So maybe we've talked around this a little bit, but maybe just to be pointed about it, from your vantage points, whether it's business, community, or academia, where do you think business and social change will intersect in the future? And Valerie, maybe I can throw it back to you again.
Well, I think you see that intersection in responsible investing, really, because I think there's a recognition that for many of the world's most complex problems, as an example, climate change, it's going to take more than government to solve it. You have to have government, you need nonprofit organizations, and then you need leadership from the private sector. And so I think that to solve these, you know, complex, messy, you know, problems, you need to have engagement really across, you know, these different elements of our society. And that's, I believe, part of the reason why you're seeing this focus on responsible investing, because, you know, many investors are looking for companies who are leaning into some of these secular shifts and secular changes and saying, how can we participate? You know, where's the puck heading? And how do we align our business, you know, to be part of the solution? And oh, by the way, those tend to be drivers of growth and profitability over the long term as well. So I think that intersection is really, it's already happening, and it's happening really with the field of responsible investing.
Yeah, absolutely. Meg, your thoughts on that intersection between social and business?
Well, I agree with what Valerie said, and I think it's going to happen around, fortunately, the urgent needs and the needs that cannot be solved by any one group. As she said, it really requires the collaboration. I think it requires us all looking at the world differently, and we need every source of inspiration and innovation that we can muster. I would mention another area where I think we've got, and James mentioned it in some of his remarks, is that this whole retraining and training of our future workforce is a huge responsibility that you can't throw over the fence to academia. It's everybody.
Right.
And so I think that's another area I would just mention.
James, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I increasingly, I sort of lived this world from 2013 to 2000, I did it. I mean, and I'll tell you what we did. It was, it's what I'm teaching at MIT and Duke and at Facebook and McKinsey. You have to unlearn a lot of what we've learned. So is labor an expense? Because GAAP tells you it is? What sort of behaviors does that drive? I spent a lot of time as a board member, investor, just coach with groups that don't perceive themselves or are not perceived as leaders, which mean women, browner people. And I play that role of sort of just standing behind them and saying, you got it. You're right. And there's a big difference for the guys listening between doing that and mansplaining. She's got it. Sometimes every now and then, it's like in any situation, it's nice to have a friend to say some things that you'd rather not have to say as sort of the persecuted one. But you ask for permission before you do that, right? And you have sort of a nonverbal agreement when that happens. But I don't talk a lot about the results of because it wasn't the most important thing financially. But yeah, how did we take a company that had no Wi-Fi computers paying COD to keynoting Dreamforce and the NRF? I mean, it wasn't just money. Money was an accelerant, but it was fundamentally the math, the culture, the brain. Systems one was completely different, and it took 2 years. And then once we did it, people realized, something's different. And so that's what I'm doing these days. If you think about what my involvement is, it's a entire allyship of ecosystems. It's these huge academic institutions, which are pillars of truth, combined with these accelerant board seats that are 3,000 CEOs. And then I'm investing. And I have a media life now with UTA. And so when you combine all of these things, those are the recipes for making change. And I am 100% convinced that if women and browner people, and particularly the intersection, if they do not lead and they are not allowed to design solutions that they know what the solutions are for, we are in for more of the same of the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And so for me, trying to put as many women and people of color in positions where they can actually really be successful. And I don't really want to get going on a lot of DEI roles where a lot of women are not set up to be successful. And it's not fair to put them in that position and then say they failed. Mm-hmm. And so I'm spending a lot of time with a lot of organizations, really talking through this and re-engineering all the math, the marketing, and the culture at the same time.
Thanks, James. Pam, I see you nodding. Do you want to add some comments? You're on mute.
Sorry. There's construction going on in my house, so I apologize that. I was trying to be thoughtful while everyone was speaking. I was just saying I'm nodding because I'm taking notes, and I think the answers have been so on point and so interesting. And I'll just start by saying I love Lori. Meg said it earlier. She mentioned soft skills, right? And the importance of leadership having soft skills and not to throw it away. And then obviously, James just talked about, unlearning what you know. I'll just say right now, and back to your question, Lori, business and social change are coming together, I think, now more than ever before. And companies and leaders are expected to have a perspective, to be empathetic, to have a voice, to stand for something. It's really, you've heard it kind of throughout the morning, leadership is taking center stage. And leaders need to lean in with a perspective. And if you think about a couple of years ago, it was frowned upon, right? You kind of stood for the company values, you kept your thoughts to yourself, and that was the end of it. And we heard, today's generation expects us to stand for something. We expect our workforce to be diverse. We expect our people to show up with different points of view. I like to say I want dissent, and then I want agreement among my team.
Right.
And so I think the importance of leaders and how they show up and what they look like is going to continue to be really important going forward, no matter if it's business, academia, or et cetera. And so that is really what's going to impact social change. I mean, I'll just say again, in our world, we have been challenged as an organization as leaders to come up with really strong DE&I plans, and they're measurable. And we all know what gets measured gets done. And for our consumer products group, it's really 4 areas. It's our organization, it's the kind of products we're making, it's the partners we're partnering with, and how are we going to impact change in our industry. And this is a dialogue that my leadership team and I are having every single day in every single piece of communication. It's not a check one and done. And back to what James said is, you have to be intentional. And think about it every single day. So to me, just to put a punctuation on it, it is the type of leader that needs to continue to go forward and that we're creating today. So I think we're all pretty aligned with different points of view on this.
Yeah. So picking up on that comment about future generations or the next generation, maybe we can say, what is your greatest learning or advice that you want these future generations to know? Valerie, can we start with you?
So the greatest learning or piece of advice, gosh, there's so many, but I would say one is that I think sometimes people feel that they have to have a quote unquote role model who looks like them in order to pursue a particular path. I disagree with that. I think that you should start with, where are your strengths? Where is your passion? What are you capable of? And just go for it. Because sometimes you may have to be the first. And I think that this mindset, if you will, comes from my mother, who was a mathematician by training, and then she was actually an operations research analyst for the Department of Defense, a very non-traditional career at that time for a woman of color. And she just said, okay, I'm good at math, I'm going to do this, and this is, it was so, and she instilled that, I think, in me and in my 2 sisters, that sometimes you may have to be the first one, and that you may find empathetic mentors and sponsors and allies. We didn't have that term back then, but allies who don't look like you, right? And they can be tremendously helpful in your career and in your personal life and in moving forward so that you can accomplish your goals.
James, what do you think we should tell future generations in terms of advice about how to make an impact or how to operate in the new world?
Look, this is the private equity guy in me that's going to say, you have to know numbers, you got to know money, get closer to the money, understand how capital markets work. Do not delegate that to someone else. It's important for you to know. Okay. Like for me, like the advice that I'm giving to young people and all the teaching things that I'm doing, and I hope that the existing leaders really give it air cover, is that you have to care. I think that that's what's happening in terms of purpose and in terms of people, again, having this existential crisis, is that it's okay to care. And so for me, I find people who are not just agile, but that they want to solve a problem, and they're not afraid to show that they care. And increasingly for me, as I think back about my first foray and sort of being this, pleated khakis wearing Asian private equity guy walking into, a room full of predominantly Black women and customers, and why, years later, what the feedback was, and it's like, James, we could feel your heart, like you cared. And there's an article on the cover of the Boston Globe that says James has the heart of a Black woman. Mindy Grossman, when she first met me, she said, you have the ears. Yeah, it's a true story. Mindy said, you have the ears of a woman, like you care. And I said to people, like, why would I want to live a life not caring. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? To care at home, but then to be callous and to be uncaring at work. That's a ridiculous life. And so I think we're all learning that the hard way now. There is no difference between work and life, unfortunately, right? It's sort of all over the place. Sort of a sad life if you don't care. So I'm trying to let people care and give them the safety to do that.
Thanks. Maybe we can switch it up and combine maybe any advice of future generations with also, who's your woman of inspiration or your role model? I think Valerie sort of answered the question for her, but Meg, what do you think?
So let me say first on advice for anyone and future generations, what I want them to know is that I really believe that leadership is not about the number of people who report to you. It's all about how you influence others. So your peers, your boss, your family, your friends, how well you lead yourself through your own self-knowledge, self-reflection, and self-care. So I would just say that within your own personal brand and your style, find your voice and dig deep on courage to share your thoughts with any group that you're a part of. Tamp down that imposter syndrome, own your unique strengths, and trust that your ideas are really important and that they may just provide the spark of innovation that's needed for a group to move forward on a really important task. So I always worry sometimes when people who don't have big teams don't think of themselves as leaders, because they are and they need to be. In terms of inspiration, was that the second question, Lori?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay. So,
I did a double on you, so sorry.
That's all right. I'm not trying to dodge the question on who is my woman of inspiration, but thankfully I have so many. And so I thought about it a lot. And, there are many famous people that you read about, you learn from, that you can take learnings from, that you're inspired by. But what I get my daily doses of inspiration are around the incredible women I see all around me doing amazing things. So, for example, a friend of mine in Northern California, Barbara Morrison, who is the CEO of a lending institution, who was just heartbroken at meeting small business owners who had a dream but would never qualify for a traditional loan. So she formed a nonprofit that gives out micro loans. Or another friend of mine in Orlando, Florida, Andrea Elliskew, who had a vision 10 years ago to pair police officers and inner city teens and have them do dragon boat paddling together and to build understanding, and great success stories from the teens. But one of the biggest impacts, if you talk to the police officers, was what they learned from those kids. Or, I could go on and on with examples, you all, but for me, thankfully, there are people and women all around us who they just go above and beyond their day jobs. They have a clear vision and a passion for something that's an important cause in the world. They can articulate that to anybody. They have grit and determination. They deal with a lot of no's and they come back fighting. So those are the people that I'm grateful to be surrounded with. They're everywhere. And we all need to do our part. So I think they're tremendous role models for us.
Thanks, Meg. Pam, who's your woman of inspiration? Or if you have advice for the future generations, you can answer that one too, but either one.
Sure. Well, there's so many. I'm with everybody. There's so many, including Mindy Grossman, by the way, James. I'm a big fan of Mindy's. So she's definitely on the list. But I would say, I'll list the women that I've been inspired by. I've tried to model myself after, and then kind of what I've learned from them and I definitely pass on a lot to some of the more future generations, as you call it. I'll start with Marva Smalls. She's the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at ViacomCBS. She's head of global inclusion. She's been a colleague and a friend and a mentor of mine for the last 20 plus years. We've been on this incredible journey together, understanding DE&I. We've had some amazing conversations, some great disagreements, and some tears along the way. But she's been a great role model. Judy McGrath, the former CEO of MTV Networks, is also somebody who I've really tried to, I'm still connected with and modeled myself after. And lastly, probably Kathy Kennedy, who's currently running Lucasfilm. And I had the pleasure of meeting a million years ago when she was at Kennedy Marshall. And I think what all three have in common is that, and this is kind of what I try to pass along to other people, is they are outstanding communicators. They're responsive, they're real, they're authentic. There's no BS, if you will. I almost caught myself. These are three people that will tell you like it is. And we like to say, I like to say getting feedback and getting, hearing from people what it's like is really important. Hear that is a gift, because too many people think they want to tell you what you want to hear. And it's the people that kind of are honest with you is great. That's both from a leadership perspective. The other thing is all three of them roll up their sleeves and they get in it. And that's something I try to do. I think Meg said, it doesn't really matter the title. You just want to get in there and get the work done. And no matter what level you are at a company, you need to stay focused on what the job is and get it done. And yes, obviously you want to delegate responsibilities, but what are you going to do? And then how are you going to advocate for them, for yourselves? I cannot tell you, especially women, how many people show up and they're afraid to ask a question. They're afraid to ask for something. They're afraid to ask for whatever it is, attend a meeting, more responsibility. And I keep saying to, especially some of the more, junior women, please, you've got to advocate for yourself, because if you don't, who else will? And so make sure you're telling people what you're doing, why you're doing it, communicate often, show up. Obviously, if you show up with a smile, it's always nice. Again, back to those soft skills, Meg, that I think are really important. Your attitude is great. And so that's kind of what the people I admire, and I could go on, but I do think, that if you are a mentor or you've been mentored by somebody, it is a path to leadership. And it's really important for everyone to kind of identify somebody. And like Valerie said, the person doesn't always have to look like you. So those are my thoughts on that.
So we have just 2 more minutes. So James, if you want to answer the Women of Inspiration question, definitely. But I want to give everybody 15 seconds to just say, what do you think, based on a chat question, what do you think are the 3 characteristics that future leaders need to have? Just real quick. So James, do you want to answer the Women of Inspiration?
Yeah, I'll combine. I'll do a merger.
Okay, perfect.
It's my oldest friend in my life is Carolyn Everson, who recently stepped down as Facebook's global head of advertising. And when I think of her, and I think about the impact she had on her team and on her clients globally, and when you look at the responses she got, here are the 3 characteristics that Carolyn, I've always admired in her. She's at the same time tenacious, but always with grace. And she is the person that would show up at your house, like I am actually, at 3 a.m. when you need a friend. And that was the type of leader she was, both for her employees and her team, but also for her clients. So I did a double whammy.
Yeah, we're doing doubles today. Valerie, in 15, 20 seconds, 3 characteristics that future leaders need to have?
Empathy, courage, and imagination.
Oh, I like that one. Meg, what do you think?
Love that. I would have said empathy, but I'm going to change it in the future to James's word, care. I love that. Communication, and I'm going to add that the strongest of those is listening skills, and put a second on Valerie's courage.
Perfect. And Pam, real quick?
James, we have to have coffee because Carolyn's not only one of my former colleagues, but one of my close friends. So yeah, we seem to know a lot of the same people and admire the same people. I agree with what's been said. I think grace under pressure is a really important skill. Authenticity, humility are the other 2 things I would just add to what hasn't been said.
Thanks. You guys have been amazing.
I have a new coffee friend now. This is great. See, I go on a panel. I make a new friend.
A lot of people in common, James.
So all of you guys have been amazing. I really appreciate your comments. It's so insightful and inspiring. Thanks again. And thanks to everyone who attended. Hope you had some good thoughts and things that you can take back to your own positions in your own life. So thanks so much.